It's great to be here, and we're looking forward to the week. There's a number of Zoetis people in the room, generally on that table over there, and they're going to put their hand up. But in particular, I'll just get Jim Johnson to stand up. Jim's out from the USA. He's speaking on Tuesday, but it would be unfortunate to get through to Tuesday and to realise he's here and not have the opportunity to speak to him. So if you want to catch up with him, he's there. Right. I've been asked to speak on heifers and bulls and what's happening and why. I mean, the challenge we face, it's a good challenge, a good problem to have, but things are changing quickly and a lot. And some of this is going to be pretty basic, but I'm going to cover the reasons why you should be DNA testing and the different forms of those. Genetic conditions, you're all well aware of those. It's a society regulation in the main part. There's differences in terms of whether you should be testing size or males versus females, and you'll be well aware of those in terms of the bylaws with your society. Parentage testing or pedigree testing, again, there's elements of regulation. We certainly see our customers having a lot of management benefit, and I've got a slide to show you on that side later on. Again, just on the size side or heifers as well. Transferring animals, AI, multi-sire mating, all that sort of stuff. I guess the latest bucket is genomics, and we're getting there in terms of helping you guys understand why and where you should be using it. It's certainly, we're over the last sort of 6 years have been gathering our knowledge as well, and it's great having Jim down here because he helps us a lot. You're effectively getting a lot more information on very young animals, and we tend to call those progeny equivalents. We're sick and tired of talking about accuracy. It's much better expressing it in terms of an equivalent number of progeny that you might be able to record against that animal, and you're effectively getting that as a calf. You get better breeding values. Your buyers make better decisions. They're really good for traits that are difficult to record. They're really good for traits of the future. And in the States, we're seeing a bit of play around the sort of risk mitigation, competition, and insurance side as well. In terms of progeny equivalents, they're pretty significant. There's the list on the screen there now. That's the effective number of progeny that you're virtually recording against animals at when they're born if you do a genomic test. So that is a lot of information, and it's an extremely large amount of information on a heifer calf. So with all that information, who's the investment for? Is it for you as breeders, or is it for your buyers? And here in Australia and in the States, there's a whole lot of different ways of thinking about this. If it was for you, you might want to be wanting to identify your absolute best animals or your worst, colour bottom 10%. You might have an ET program. Ultimately, you're getting a big increase in accuracy, and you're going to get a rather large improvement in genetic gain. And again, we've got some good examples on that. For your buyer, you might want to be providing him with the absolute best breeding values that he can possibly purchase. You want your bulls to perform when they get on farm, because that's a criticism, that bulls get out there and they don't perform. And also there's an element of pedigree verification when you do the genomic test. So a lot more reliable bulls going out there to the commercial sector. I've diagrammatically tried to visualise this. So if the breeder is the black line along the top and the commercial farmer is the one down the bottom, in my view, if you're HD 50K'ing animals or I50K'ing animals now, and you're selling them out the gate, so the breeding values are great, very reliable animals, you're really doing that. Your commercial farmer is getting closer to you, okay, which is great, and he's going to really, really like that. So at a point in time, he's able to achieve a certain amount of gain, which is going to be behind you, but he's going to be closer. The other line of thought is that by internalising that testing and capturing all that information within your herd, you're actually able to increase your genetic gain. So the line tips up at the end, you're able to go faster. There's a lag before those bulls get sold, but ultimately it means that your commercial farmer is also going faster. And I'd suggest that actually he's getting a better response earlier in time. And that's just a conceptual thing. We see that there's just so much great data out there now, it's fantastic, and especially on the dairy side. In terms of, you can visualise this as a sire, the sire team being the red line, the breeder being the red line and the commercial farmer being the blue line, and you can see that over time they track really well, although this is an example of cow and milk sire, milk breeding values. Here's an example, the same thing where there's an antagonism between milk yield and reproduction. You can see that the sire's below the cow until genomics kicks in around about 2005, 2007, and actually the reverse was trend. The trend was reversed, largely because of the introduction of genomics, and that's been revolutionary in the dairy market. I guess the real advantage, especially on females, is being able to get a whole lot of information effectively as a calf very early on in an animal's life, whereas if you think about the female side, you're really waiting for daughters of bulls to get into production. You're having to wait multiple years before all that information comes back, and we can see the benefit in slides to come around genetic gain of making much better selection decisions by having more accuracy and advancing the whole process effectively. Some numbers, because we often get questions about what's happening in the States in terms of adoption and where are we placed in New Zealand. This was a slide, this was a page out of the AGI annual report. Last year they had tested around about 23% of their annual calf registrations. So if calf registrations are about 300,000 a year, they're doing, whatever 23% of that is. This year, it's going to be closer to 35% of 300,000 calf registrations. So that's a lot of genotypes that they're banking. In New Zealand, we introduced HG50K in 2010, and we've certainly grown. Where last year we did, that'll be this year and last year, we did between sort of 7 and 8% of calf registrations. So we've got some genotypes, which is great. And I'm sure we'll be getting more over time. There's also quite a switch in the States between just testing males and they're actually doing a whole lot more female testing, especially those young heifers. Herds over there are getting a significant amount of genetic gain because they're getting much more information on the young heifer side. So in New Zealand, we are doing more heifer testing, which is great. But the fact is that that's all coming from largely one herd in New Zealand. So I think over the next couple of years, you guys are going to learn more about what's going on in other parts of the world, and I hope that you really appreciate the importance of getting better selection decisions on your female side. The impact of genomics on the average age of dams is really interesting. As I said before, there's a trend in the USA to moving to testing heifer calves. In some elite herds, these are Angus herds in the USA, the average age of their dams is 3. Used to be 5 or 6, now it's 3. So the shorter the generation interval, the more genetic gain they're making, and they're able to do that because the accuracies are so much higher. Similar theme in the dairy industry, the average age of the parents of new bulls going out into the market is half of that of what it was in 2010, and they've managed to double their genetic gain. So visually, you can see there back in 2007, 2008, the parent age was around about 80 to 100 months. 2013, it's right down to about 30 or 40, and that's all because of genomics. And that's the same on the female side. So quite a drastic change. And ultimately, it's about that genetic gain. And again, this is a dairy example, but it's a great example to use. You can see that in the grey there at the far end, that in that genomic era, the genetic progress has really started to accelerate. In New Zealand, we've got some similar examples also, not so much from the genomics, but actually just from using sire trace whole herd. So fortunate to have this information and really appreciate it, from organising a sire trace program back in sort of 2012, 13, and letting those letting the effect of that roll out over a couple of years, and then those young animals hit the ground, you can see the increase in genetic gain from 2014 and 15. And it's a little bit hard to evaluate, but we suspect a large proportion of that is due to side-trace. So just getting better pedigree, let alone genomics. So it's been some very interesting information to receive. And that's me. That was a bit of a flyby of what's happening in DNA testing in New Zealand and around the world. It's changing all the time. We have moved from bull testing to heifer testing. Every farm is different. No one wants to do it the same way. And that's part of the exciting thing of working in this field. And thank you very much. And thank you guys for all the support you give us throughout the year as well. Thank you very much.
We've got time for a couple of questions. So any questions for Sharl? Neil?
Sharl, you made a fairly big claim before that genomic testing was responsible for the upturn in fertility in dairy in the States on that graph. What particular traits have you identified and been able to improve with genomic testing? Or what breeding values?
On the dairy side?
Yes, on the dairy side.
So we don't have a dairy product in New Zealand. They do in Australia and the States. So I probably can't answer that very accurately. But the effect of genomics is, especially for those really hard to record traits like RFI and pregnancy and things like that, is that you're relying on performance recording and pedigree largely only. And genomics is, a whole lot of markers. A whole lot of markers able to contribute to the accuracy of that evaluation. And so it really is just making the breeding value a lot more specific and informing the evaluation and selection decisions.
Yeah, but there'll have to be traits associated with that. So
heifer pregnancy, days to calving, things like that. Yep.
Yeah, that's in beef industry.
Yep.
But that's not in the dairy industry.
That's right. As I said, I'm not an expert in dairy, but I'm trying to draw correlations between what's going on in the dairy industry in the States. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Okay. I've got one.
Yep.
You're talking about generation interval and ramping up genetic gain,
yep.
And there's a school of thought that people would like to extend the lifetime of cows.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that one?
Yep. So it's a hot topic in the States, especially. Your commercial farmers are looking for cows that aren't necessarily going to have a short life. They want to be productive for a long time. And yet you can see the trends, the generation intervals getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I guess the answer would be that I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think you can have both. And I'm going to we have to let that debate play out effectively. It's not just in New Zealand where we have those concerns, it's around the world. Yep.
Thank you. Sharl, just thinking, I guess New Zealand, where we've got a lot of sheep breeders, and perhaps we've been way ahead with our uptake of these tools with sheep breeding. Often they're very much the same farmers. I guess there's only so many people sitting in this room, but really a bunch of our contemporaries should be in here. I was just wondering, might be good for our industry or ourselves to just be able to see how we are doing with our uptake of these tools for sheep breeding, to be able to grasp in our minds where we should be at with beef breeding.
Yep, and they are the same tools. They work in exactly the same way. It's not as if the dairy versus the beef versus the sheep tools work differently or are any less useful. There's great potential to have more adoption, and I guess what I'm trying to demonstrate is that, especially in the USA, there is a heck of a lot of adoption and there's a heck of a lot of genetic progress. So the opportunity is there, and it's actually not for you as breeders. It's actually for commercial farmers. Those are the people that want this technology used, and I think in a few years to come, as perhaps technology platforms change and there's a little bit more realisation about the production benefits that can actually be made, I suspect that the commercial farmer might be requesting for these things a little bit more than they are.
Thanks, Sharl. Thanks very much.